So, this podcast that I just did kind of went terribly. It got a little ugly. So terrible that I'm going to cut in a little intro. My guest was Philip Bump, the Washington Post columnist most associated with pouring cold water on the Hunter Biden story. He's an expert on the current state of the Hunter Biden affair, and I thought we'd have a good conversation. But he left very angry, which surprised me. He's known for writing about this issue, but something about the way I approach this seemed to get quite under his skin. I had many points to make, and few of them that I felt I was able to get out. We got particularly bogged down in Devon Archer's interview on Tucker Carlson. Now, anybody who watches this show or listens to this podcast is aware that I'm no Tucker Carlson fan. But I happen to believe that no matter how unreliable and frankly misleading his reporting can often be, his interviews, or any interview, his interviews are almost always valid. I've done many interviews, and the politics of the questioner has never affected my answers. It's never left me wanting to please them. And as long as they didn't edit my interviews to leave stuff out, which has been done to me, any interview I've ever done is a perfectly fair indication of what my feelings are. My general feeling about the Archer interview is that it's easy to give a straightforward answer to a straightforward question, and complexity is often a red flag and usually indicates that something less than the truth is being relayed. So, for instance, when Archer was asked if the firing of Shokin, the Ukrainian prosecutor, was seen as a bad thing by the Burisma executives, he answers things like, well, that's the narrative that was spun to me, or that's what the story we were fed by DC, or this is complex. It's not like playing checkers. But he could just say, yes, the board saw it as a bad thing that Shokin was fired, or words to that effect. Yes, we felt that we were better off with Shokin. But for some reason, this double talk that Archer engages in seems obvious to me and telling, but not even worth commenting on to Bump. And this goes to my general feeling that so much of the press has lost their nose for news. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong about this. You can be the judge. Send me an email to podcast@comedycellar.com and let me know what you think. I'm going to watch the show now, and I think I'll try to cut in some of the testimony and evidence that Bump and I both alluded to, but we didn't have time to find and read at the time because it was getting pretty testy between us. So here it is, my interview with Philip Bump about the Hunter Biden story. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Live from the Table. My name is Noam Dworman. I'm the owner of the Comedy Cellar. We're here on Sirius XM Radio. I have with me Mr. Dov Davidoff.
Yes.
And this is a show I'm looking very much forward to. We have with us Washington Post columnist Philip Bump, who is there any other? He has a book coming out.
Came out in January, yeah.
Put the mic closer to you if you don't mind. Book came out in January. What's the name of the book?
It's called The Aftermath, The Last Days of the Baby Boom and the Future of Power in America.
Wow.
And this is about
Is it totally messed up? Yeah. Okay.
I asked somebody, I don't want to say his name, who is the smartest guy in America who thinks that the Hunter Biden story is a nothing burger?
Okay.
And this guy told me, Philip Bump. And the guy who said it was an estimable guy.
Wow.
So I am of the opposite opinion.
Okay.
And I want to talk to the smartest person I can find on planet Earth who disagrees with me.
That's great.
Okay, well, I hate to disappoint you, but I would not say the Hunter Biden story is a nothing burger.
Okay.
I would say that the effort to extrapolate from Hunter Biden to his father is, at this point, a nothing burger.
Okay,
so there's a distinction that it
yes. I accept the distinction, and I disagree with you on that. I think it's terrible for the father.
For the layman out there, should we provide a little synopsis of what's actually taking place? Because I don't think a lot of people are clear. They're only clear on their emotions associated with the names and the parties.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so, but obviously I'm going to do it from my perspective. So
Do it, but
hopefully I'm not
there's
offending.
so much to cover. Do it, but do
Sure.
it really
Because it's
succinctly.
important for the
Yeah.
audience. Not everybody's.
I mean, the upshot is Hunter Biden was working as a businessman. He has a law degree, and he was pretty obviously trading on his name during the time in which Joe Biden was both working in the Obama White House and then after he had left the Obama White House. And since the Republicans have taken control of the House in January in particular, there have been a number of investigations that have sort of dug into the business dealings of Hunter Biden and associated Biden family members, including Hunter's uncle, Joe's brother, James Biden, and some other people that are sort of in the Biden family who had received money. And it's not clear if the money was directly from business deals that Hunter Biden made, but in essence, the question is, and the idea that's being propagated by Republicans is that Joe Biden was involved in this to a significant extent, and they believe benefited financially from these business relationships, although they have, as of yet, been unable to prove any such allegation.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, really fair. That was
Okay,
really
great.
articulate. That was great.
He's-
Help
he's-
me.
He's a professional.
You know,
Dov.
I mean-
He's the brightest guy in the country that disagrees with
There
you.
you go.
Okay, so where should I start? So let me ask you a few questions to see what kind of factual basis we have in common. I want to start maybe. So this is my basic feeling is that what we're seeing is akin to an ocean full of sharks who have simultaneously lost their ability to smell blood in the water. The press seems to have lost its ability to alert itself to obvious facts that need to be followed up on, and I believe they do that intentionally or subconsciously because they just don't want to pursue it. But
Because
as
of political beliefs?
Harry Enton's father, the judge, said he'd rather have 10 examples of circumstantial evidence than one example of direct evidence, because he didn't say this second part, because each example of circumstantial evidence represents a probability, and when you start multiplying probabilities by probability,
composite
it
is
becomes
higher than the
almost
one.
impossible for all these things to have happened. The circumstantial evidence here is everywhere, and I'm going to start by also saying the notion that we should expect to see a check winding up in Joe Biden's account is absurd.
Okay.
I guess I'm going to go this way. So, I grew up in a very, very close family with me, my father, and my grandmother. And when my father did well, that benefited my grandmother. There was never any, no money that came to my father ended up deposited in my grandmother. But when she needed it years later, she had it. Anybody who did anything for me, financial or otherwise, this was the most important thing in my father's life. He didn't need the check written out to him. Anybody who would do anything to help me was like doing something for my father. And this is this is how families work. So, but let's leave that aside. Do you agree? Let's start with the latest revelations, the Devon article.
Okay, but I don't want to leave that aside, and so I hope we can come back to that.
Okay, we'll
that
come back to it.
presentation. Fine.
But this is the first key question, the threshold question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that Joe Biden knew that he was helping his son when he did things like make these calls, receive these calls in front of them, take a meeting with these people?
So this is a question that is presented in a particular frame that I think is worth challenging by
Okay.
itself. So here's what we know. We know from testimony from Devon Archer in particular, Devon Archer having been a business partner of Hunter Biden's, that there would be times, 20 occasions, he said, over the course of something like a decade of the two of them working together, during which, in particular, Joe Biden would be calling his son Hunter. Hunter would pick up the phone as he was in a meeting with other people, put it on speakerphone, and say, hey, here's my dad. Dad, say hi. Do I think that Joe Biden, when he was cognizant of the fact that Hunter Biden was in those meetings, was aware that Hunter Biden was probably using that as a way to bolster himself? Yes, I think he probably was aware of that. Does that mean that
Probably or for sure?
I don't know. I can't read his mind, but I think, he was probably aware of it.
Well, how many times?
I work for the Washington Post. Probably means for sure in layman's
how many
terms.
times
Like, this is
have
what
you
we
ever
say.
called up and had conversations about the weather with strangers? Never.
Strange. I don't understand.
I'm saying
he
that-
wasn't calling Hunter Biden's business associates. He's calling his son.
Right. But
And this
then,
was particularly in
but-
the time
but then-
after Beau Biden had died, and he was building a stronger relationship
Well,
with his son.
normally when you get a call when you're in a meeting, you say, "Dad, I'll call you back in a
Yeah, but that was
meeting."
Hunter Biden's decision, not Joe Biden's decision. Was Hunter Biden
No,
trying to
there were
leverage
also,
those calls?
there-
Certainly.
Archer also said that Hunter called Joe.
He said there were
sometimes.
occasions in which that had occurred. Yes.
Yes, so
right. And so,
that-
but if do you have children?
Yes.
If your son calls you, do you know what it is, or do you just take the call?
No, I don't. If I'm in a business meeting, I'll usually.
But that's not what you're saying. You're saying Hunter Biden called Joe. If Joe Biden picks up Hunter Biden's call and Hunter Biden's in a meeting with people, it's not Joe's fault for answering. Nor is it Joe's fault if Hunter Biden answers the phone when Hunter Biden's in a business meeting.
No. I'm saying, listen. Okay, so let's move back. This is
Sure, that's fine.
Burisma was identified by the State Department as a
Mm-hmm.
corrupt company.
Sure.
Biden made speeches. Where did I have it? I had it here. This is from Reuters. Biden said the United States was ready to help Ukraine stabilize and strengthen the economy. He warned leaders they needed to crack down on abuses within the political system.
Right.
The only thing worse than having no hope at all is having hopes rise and see them dashed repeatedly on the shoals of corruption. He referred to the cancer of corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, so now you're in charge of corruption in Ukraine. You're making these speeches about corruption in Ukraine, and your son is going to work for the criminals. The criminals. And you're having 20 casual conversations and meeting with them.
Right.
You know, listen, the alternative is that we need to get this guy. This guy's a fucking
Look,
idiot.
You're conflating a lot of different
No, I'm
things.
not conflating
here. You
anything.
are unfairly. You are absolutely.
What am I
Look,
conflating?
you asked me. I'm the expert here, right? That's why I'm.
What
sitting in
am I
this chair.
conflating?
Here's what you're conflating. These 20 calls were not all with people from Burisma present, right? That's not the case. We don't know how many of these calls involve potential Burisma executives, if any.
Let's say it's 3 calls.
Let's say it's 0. Why do you get to pick a number? We don't
Because
know what they are.
no.
But this is important because Burisma is the only thing that the Republicans have been able to hang their hat on. Burisma and these tenuous ties, which your presentation of even the Burisma relationship and Biden's with that wasn't fair.
No,
to
Archer
what
was
the
talking
reality
about
was.
Burisma.
No, he was talking about all the relationships.
He's talking about Burisma, and we know that Biden had dinner with this guy Przarsky, whatever his name is. We know that. So let's
That's a bad look.
let's
Absolutely.
let's just take that one thing.
Sure.
You're in charge of corruption for the United States of America. This company has been identified as corrupt.
He was not in charge of corruption. He was part of an administration, one of whose values was to target corruption in Ukraine. But that's important because Biden was not the first actor in the administration to raise
Doesn't matter.
questions about.
He's the vice
course it
president.
matters.
No, it doesn't. He's the vice president. He's in charge of American policy in Ukraine. American policy in Ukraine is to root out corruption.
Sure.
Burisma is identified as criminal. They're throwing bribes all over the country.
Right. There are some significant questions both about Burisma and the owner, Mykolas Lozchevsky. Absolutely. Yes, that's true.
He decides it's okay to have dinner with these people. Now, how is that perceived? Now, that's the only reason he would do that, obviously, to hook his son up in some way. How is that perceived by Ukrainians?
So I don't remember the timeline of when this dinner occurred. So I can't speak to that. I can say a few things. The first thing is that Joe Biden was part of an administration effort and an international effort to remove Viktor Shokin, the sitting prosecutor general in Ukraine, who was seen as being.
Phil, I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to stick to just answer my question and then say anything else you want. But my question is this.
Question.
If he's sitting down with the criminal,
Sure.
the vice president, from the Ukrainian point of view, in that corrupt country, I'll answer and you tell me.
Sure.
Don't they say the fix is in? The vice president sitting down with that. It's hands off Burisma.
So you don't think it's important what the time frame is in which that occurred?
Archer had said, I can find his testimony where he said that this was how that this was the signal to let everybody knows that Burisma was protected.
Well, the entire reason that Hunter Biden was on Burisma's board absolutely was to present the image of the Bidens being involved in Burisma's activity and being a protector of Burisma. Devin Archer absolutely said that. It seems very clear that that is the case. That's Hunter Biden. And there's no question. Look, I am not disputing with you at all. And I stipulated at the outset that what Hunter Biden was engaged in was definitely trading on his name. It was, I don't know.
I'm not talking about Hunter. I'm talking about Joe.
But I don't understand. how am I supposed to? If this is, I'm treating this as a good faith debate. We're having a good faith conversation.
Yeah.
But you can't then set the terms of that debate so that they're only favorable to you. Of course, it's important to talk about Hunter Biden and the time frame of Hunter Biden's relationship with Burisma and the other outside pressures that exist on Burisma. If we're going to assess Joe Biden as having acted in a negative way.
What time frame do you need to know?
Well, just tell me, like, for example.
Yeah.
It was in early 2015 when the Obama administration first started putting pressure on the ouster of Shokin, when there were questions about Shokin protecting Burisma by not turning over information to British investigators, and it was later in that year when Joe Biden specifically did it. So, when was this dinner? I don't remember when this dinner was.
March 20th, 2015. Is
right,
the dinner.
Fine. So this was before. This was right at the outset. Or I don't remember
Biden
when
made
the
his
first
anti-corruption
was.
speeches in 2014, at the end of 2014.
Sure, fine, great. Well, I mean, the primary pressure campaign on Shokin began in 2015.
And this was after Burisma.
So who else was at the dinner?
This was after Burisma had been identified as a corrupt enterprise.
Sure, but I don't remember how many other people were at the dinner. My recollection is that there were a number of people at.
Do you recall? My question is.
Sure.
That if you're in charge,
the answer is the Ukrainians were not aware of the dinner. That's the answer. The broader answer.
You don't think the guy went back and told people he had dinner with the vice president?
Oh, okay, fine. Then some Ukrainians were. What are you asking? You were asking what the Ukrainians thought, which I assume you meant the Ukrainian people.
What I'm getting at is that if you're in charge of American policy in Ukraine and you've identified corruption as the number one problem, and your son, first of all, you should have stopped him, but your son takes a job.
Yeah, he should have. And he was warned by the State Department.
Your son takes a job with those people.
Right.
You do everything you can to make it clear to those people, listen, stay the fuck away from me. You're criminals. I don't know what's going on with my son, but do not expect me to be chummy with you. I'm not having dinner with you. I'm not taking calls with you and you're putting me on speakerphone, whatever it is. And I'm saying that because he did that, well, okay. So when this happened, it was a big thing. And
you are putting a lot of weight on this dinner because this dinner exists. That's why we're having this conversation about this dinner. This dinner is important because the dinner is one of the few times in which one can point to a direct connection between Joe Biden and Burisma that appears to be intentional. We don't know that it's intentional. It appears to be intentional. What this conversation, though, elides is the other things Devin Archer said. Devin Archer saying, for example, under oath, under penalty of perjury, that there was no relationship, that Joe Biden was not involved in the business that they undertook. And so we have all this focus from Republicans and from Biden critics on the fact that these calls were answered. And yes, after a while, Joe Biden should have been like, hey, look, am I on speaker? Don't put me on speakerphone. Absolutely. I think that's a fair thing to say, given what we now know. But Devin Archer, who was the one who reported this, also said Joe Biden wasn't involved. We tried to give the impression that Joe Biden was involved, but he wasn't. But that's what we were doing. We were trading on it, which everyone understands and knows. And so the reason we're talking about this dinner is not because this dinner was necessarily important or revelatory. We're talking about this dinner because it's one of the few points when you talk about, having multiple circumstantial pieces of evidence to tie together. This is one of the very few circumstantial pieces of evidence that exists, and that's why this conversation is happening.
How come I can't fucking find this thing? I have it in an email. In the Wall Street Journal, Daniel Kaleniuk, head of Ukraine's Anti-Corruption Action Center. This one, again, is how the Ukraine says, if an investigator sees the son of the vice president of the United States is part of the management of a company, the investigator will be uncomfortable pushing the case forward.
Sure, 100%. Yes, and that's why he was on Burisma's
now,
board.
Is that above Biden's ability to understand? Wouldn't Biden understand that?
I mean, first of all, that quote I assume is a more recent quote. I don't know the extent to which.
This is from what this.
Well, I mean, it was post 2016.
No, that's from when that quote came out when Hunter took the job.
Okay, fine, totally fair.
Yeah.
I don't know the extent to which Joe Biden was aware of what Burisma was doing. He certainly should have been.
It was a controversy when Biden. A lot of people were complaining about it when Hunter took the job.
Sure. And there were warnings, as I mentioned. George Kent from the State Department came to Joe Biden and said, this is a bad look. He should not be involved with this. And Joe Biden defended him. I'm not defending any of that. Right? I'm not defending any of it. He should not have been that. But here's the issue. The issue is, do we then extrapolate outward from there to Joe Biden doing favors on Hunter Biden's behalf? That's the question. And that is the scandal if it exists. And that's the thing for which they're lax evidence.
Okay, so what you're not going to concede, and I guess maybe you understand why I'm pushing it,
No, lay it on me. Let's see what I don't concede.
is that the Vice President of the United States,
Sure.
in charge of corruption,
Right.
knew that when he was helping his son look good to the criminals, he was communicating to Ukraine, hands off Burisma.
Okay. You don't know that.
Yes.
I don't know that.
Well, Well, he knew, or he's an idiot.
That's not fair. It's simply not
Who
fair.
could not? It was. I mean, people were saying it. People within the administration were warning him.
People within the administration were warning him. He should have been aware that having Hunter Biden there was problematic, of course. And
any
I'm sure
person sophisticated enough to be president of the United States, who's fighting corruption, if he's up to that job, understands that. You know what you said? If I had Eric Adams' son working here, and he introduced himself to the health inspectors, yes, I'm Eric, the mayor's son.
Sure.
Oh, we don't know that. Of course we know. Of course I know.
I'm conceding that point.
So
yes.
Biden. So this is that on steroids. He's the vice president of the United States. He's shaking hands with the criminals. He's taking calls. He's making small talk with the criminals. He knows he's communicating to the criminals.
Okay, let's parse.
Listen, I think you said he's selling the illusion of influence. So
Let's
am I wrong or am I
parse who
right?
the bad actors are. Let's parse who the bad
Am I
actors
wrong
are.
or am I right?
No, I'm not gonna. I'm not. You present this extended soliloquy about this theoretical Eric Adams hiring, and I'm expected to just say yes or no to it. No, let's take your example. You hire Eric Adams' son.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric Adams comes to work here. You do so understanding that perhaps Eric Adams' son talking to the health inspector will make it easier for you in your business, right? Eric Adams' son is complicit with that. He says, yes, fine, I'm happy to help play that role, right? Who are the bad actors there? It's you and Eric Adams' son. Does Eric Adams know that that's why he's been hired?
Fair, the analogy is not perfect. I was not making the analogy for that point. You're correct about what you just said. Logically correct. That was not my point.
Okay.
My point is that everybody would read the fact that the mayor's son is working somewhere is that this place is not one you fuck with.
Sure, that's fine. Which is why you hired Eric Adams' son. Which is why Burisma hired Joe Biden's son. Yes, okay, fine. Yes, we're on the same page.
Now, if Eric Adams makes it clear, it tries to hook his son up with me, and Eric Adams believes I'm a criminal.
Sure.
Listen, let's get back to it.
Then what's Eric Adams do?
Okay, let's get off the Eric Adams.
To his son as an adult.
It's confusing because it's not a perfect analogy. My point is this: either there's two options here, really. One option, which I don't think is possible, is that Biden had no idea, son of a bitch. I didn't know by taking these calls and having dinner with these guys, I was going to communicate that I was in on this. I thought they would still think that I was after them, and that everybody in Ukraine would say it's meaningless. But
then he went after them. It just doesn't make any sense.
Let's leave
everything
that aside.
you're presenting is within the frame that you're trying to reinforce.
Can we just take it step
it's
by
begging
step?
the question,
Okay.
please.
So if he did that,
Sure.
he's working against American policy.
Well, except for the fact, and this is what you keep skipping, and this is what the Republicans
I'm not trying
are
to
skipping.
skip anything. Go ahead.
But except for the fact that what he did then is join an international coalition putting pressure on the guy who was seen as the corrupt prosecutor in Ukraine. And then they got rid of him. I just don't understand.
Fair enough.
Fair
What
else do you want him to do?
Well,
and that was, according to Devin Archer, contrary to Burisma's interests.
Okay,
what else do you want him to do?
We're going to take that. You're wrong about that. We're going to take that up in a second.
I'm not wrong about it.
But if I can prove that you're wrong about that, then will you have to go back and concede my point is serious?
Look,
if the reason my point is not serious,
what do you want Joe Biden to do when he's sitting there in 2016? Hunter Biden's on the board of Burisma. What's he going to do? Legitimately,
what should he do? He should tell his son, listen, these guys are corrupt.
Okay, do you know he didn't do that?
You asked me what he should do. He should say, these guys are corrupt.
Okay.
I, under no circumstances, put me on the phone with them.
Sure.
I'm the vice president of the fucking United States of America in
That's
charge of these people.
Right.
And under no circumstances will I sit down to dinner with them
because
that will give them the impression that I'm okay with them.
Sure. Okay. So fine.
And that will give other people in Ukraine, as I just read this quote,
Sure.
the people in charge of fighting corruption in Ukraine were upset about this because that was the message it communicated.
Okay, now that quote doesn't actually speak to what you were just saying. The quote doesn't speak to Joe Biden's direct involvement. It speaks to the fact that his son was involved in it. I think that's worth pointing out. Second of all, even ceding the point that you think, well, no, it's not. It's actually better. Ceding the point that you think Joe Biden should have done all of these things, which assumes that Joe Biden had the same assumptions you did, knowing what he knew about the situation in Ukraine and Burisma. Ceding even that, you also don't know that Joe Biden didn't do any of those things. And if Joe Biden did say those things, Hunter Biden, let me finish, and Hunter Biden picks up the phone when he's in a meeting, Joe Biden says, hey, how's it going? And he's like, oh, I'm sitting here with these people. And maybe Joe Biden's irritated. You just don't know about these things. But what we do know is we have a business partner says he wasn't involved in business. We know that he cracked down on Shokin.
No.
Like, it just...
We know they sat down to dinner. And we know
one time.
One time is a lot.
But you don't
I sat down with Al Capone. It was just once.
But do you know that Joe Biden was aware of who was at the dinner?
Absolutely. Of course he was. Of course he was.
Okay. All right. You think Joe Biden is every dinner Joe Biden's ever gone to that involves multiple people, he knows all the people who are sitting in that room?
If a father and son are talking every day, multiple times a day, they run out of stuff to talk about. If it's just the weather, at some point they're talking about.
I'm not saying they just talked about the weather. I'm not saying they talked about more than
we all have relationships with our parents and with people close to us.
That's fine. But again, you are centered on this dinner because it's all you've got. That's my point.
I have a lot more.
Then lay it on me.
Okay,
Let's go.
So
let's move on from the dinner.
I didn't mean to get bogged down in it. What do the following words mean to you?
Okay.
What if I say a narrative was spun to me? What does spun mean?
Right. What do you know exactly what spun means? So I'm not.
I want to make sure you know it. You agree with me.
No, I work for the Washington Post. I've never heard this term before. Lay it on me.
ChatGPT says when someone spun to them, use a kind of casual. It basically means the information story was given to them in a way that might be biased or slanted. Kind of someone biased or slanted. And the word that's fed. I'm sorry, the word fed.
Okay.
Biased or slanted.
Okay.
And the word spun.
Just cut to the chase. What's the point you're trying to make?
So let's just go over all the Devin.
Because if it involves Devin Archer not having said that Burisma staffers and associates told him that it was bad if Shokin was out, then you're incorrect. And
here was the Biden quote in 2014. To be very blunt about it, you have to fight the cancer of corruption.
Sure.
He said in the icy streets of Kyiv.
That's right. Okay. And then a year and a half later, he called for the ouster of Victor Shokin, the corrupt prosecutor general.
So now let's go through the Shokin stuff. So
sure, please.
Let me start with the testimony, and then we'll play the video. So my experience in business, and Dov, you tell me if this is correct or not. My experience in business is, now I have to often parse fights between employees, fights between customers and employees, fights between all kinds, and I have to try to figure out who's telling the truth. And one of the things I've learned is that when people start giving very complex answers.
Now, do you have these fights? Are these fights under oath when you do them or no?
No.
Okay.
When people start giving very complex answers to simple questions, that's usually where I smell a rat.
Got it.
So let's just read a little bit of the testimony about Shokin, and then we'll listen to it. And you tell me why he said this stuff. Question: Are you aware that Vadim had told Blue Star that one of his pressure he was facing was related to Shokin and the investigation into Burisma? So yes, I was. The narrative that was spun to me, quite frankly, just to be, and I remember this because obviously it's a narrative that was spun to me, was that Shokin was under control and whoever the next person that was brought in was, the fact that he was, this is the narrative that was spun to me 3 times. The Shokin being fired was not good because he was under control as to Mikola.
Zlochevsky, the founder of Burisma.
So, right.
So that's not Devin Archer saying that he was told that Shokin's ouster was bad for Burisma.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's saying.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said. He said, and you said he didn't.
Right, because he doesn't say. He says that was a narrative that was spun to him. Oh. Now we just what's spun. Okay. When somebody says the story was spun to them, what they're saying is. Well, this is the obvious meaning of the term.
Yeah, but your entire argument depends on the vocabulary lesson that's involved in the word spun. You're going to exclude all the other evidence, like the fact that Shokin was facing...
I have a lot of evidence
was stymieing the British who were trying to invest
I have a lot of evidence here.
Okay, lay it on me. This is what I'm saying. Give me the evidence. You keep not giving me evidence. Give me evidence.
And then he says, and so...
I mean, do you think you have evidence I haven't seen? You think I don't like...
And so based upon that, is your testimony here that Victor Shokin... Hunter Biden and Vadim never discussed the investigation by Shokin into Burisma? Schwartz, that's the lawyer, intervenes now. You're asking Archer. I can't. Schwartz, what conversation he was personally proven to? Mandolfo, yes. He says again, yeah, I was, and I answered before, I was spun a narrative that Shokin was good for Burisma. Now, leave that aside. Now
that's the questioning from whom? Comer and the Republican side,
Now let's go to the video of him answering the same question on
tell me Tucker Carlson.
On Tucker Carlson. You're laughing like the crazy professor. Who cares? It's an interview. It's not what Tucker said.
That's fine.
Okay. And
I mean,
and
Biden bragged at Council on Foreign Relations, they had $1 billion coming from IMF, and I said, if you don't fire this man, you're not getting them $1 billion.
Right. But it's I think on this one it certainly wasn't made clear to us at the board level, that was a favor to be done. The narrative, I don't know the narrative, and I don't want to lead anyone down that kind of path that's what happened, because I don't know the narrative.
But Joe Biden knew that his son was on the board of this company that was being hassled by the prosecutor whose firing he was calling for.
Right.
Yeah. And this took place 3 years after he sent you a letter saying thanks for all the work you're doing with Hunter. So
wait.
clearly
I've seen this.
This would benefit the family.
This is the key now.
Right. I don't want to get it, but the narrative was that Shokin was already taken care of. That was the popular narrative. That's the only thing
that he was already on his way out.
Exactly. That was the narrative that was fed to the board.
Okay, so you were told when Shokin got fired that it had nothing to do with it.
No, we were told that was bad, and we don't want a new prosecutor. Shokin was taken care of. So it's
No, keep going.
This is not like, checkers. This is multiple dimensions here. So a popular...
This is like Connect 4.
No, exactly.
Okay, stop there, Nicole. This is not like checkers. This is a narrative that was fed to us. There are multiple dimensions here. On what planet is that man obviously not indicating that things are not as they appear? Who speaks that way?
A lot of smoke.
Who speaks that way about a narrative? Were you cheating on me?
This is so bizarre.
Were you fucking his wife? Well, that was the narrative that was spun. But this is not checkers.
I get the gag here, but
are you telling me that's the way an honest person?
Here's what I know. Let me finish. Yeah. Here's what I know. I know that under oath he said that he was told by people from Burisma that it was bad to have Shokin ousted. I know that there's lots of evidence.
So this, I'm going to cut this in here. This is a section of the testimony that he refers to a few times. So I looked it up just now. Goldman, who is the Democratic questioner, says, so was it Shokin was ultimately removed from office? Archer, right. Goldman again. Was that a bad thing and the Burisma leaders felt like that would be bad for them? Mr. Archer, that's what I was told. Mr. Goldman, okay. Then Mr. Schwartz comes in, who is Archer's lawyer. Not by the Burisma leaders. Archer, exactly, not by the Burisma leaders. I was told by the DC team. Goldman says, got it. And here is a second exchange also with Goldman. Mr. Goldman, let's talk about legally. I think just pivot to that because you had said earlier that I believe the direct quote is that Burisma felt like they had Shokin under control. Mr. Archer, correct. Mr. Goldman, what did you mean by that? Mr. Archer, that was a narrative that was told to me by various of the DC team that the firing of Shokin was bad for Burisma because he was under control. Mr. Goldman, what did you understand under control to mean? Mr. Archer, meaning that they were going to maybe give a slap on the wrist as opposed to, Mr. Goldman, okay. Mr. Archer, seize all his assets. Mr. Goldman, because there was a lot of characterizations by the Republicans in the first part about a Ukrainian investigation. Mr. Archer, But Mr. Goldman, but you're not actually aware of any investigation by the prosecutor general in Ukraine into Burisma, which is different from the British investigation. Mr. Archer, right. So, in good faith, I've looked up the two examples I could find, and both of them have Archer saying that it was the Washington, D.C. team that told him that narrative. I cannot find anywhere where he says that he heard it from anybody on the board of Burisma.
I know that there's lots of evidence that Shokin was protecting Burisma. There's evidence in that the British were investigating Mikhail Zlochevsky, and he stymied them. He didn't give them the information. They had to drop their investigation.
I want to hear all this, but we're talking about Archer.
This is important. This is important.
It's important, but it's not responsive to this.
Because this isn't important. This is not under oath. This is him saying what you say he's saying, and you saying that, he must mean something else, even though he's saying explicitly, I was told that Shokin was under control and it was bad for him to leave. I'm supposed to impute from that, because of the way he said it, he was lying. But
Well, it's the way he says
but that runs contrary to all the evidence I'm trying to present you. But you don't want to hear the evidence because you
no,
want to
no,
go with your assumption about it.
I don't have any assumption.
You do, of course you do. This whole conversation is predicated on your
watching
assumption.
him. Okay, I'm going to cut one more thing in here, and this is a little risky because it's nothing I've ever done before, which is to impeach something that a guest had said when they're not there to defend themselves. I'm going to try to do it very, very carefully, but should Mr. Bump object to this, I'll make sure either to undo it or to give him a chance to comment on it. So he wrote an article in the Washington Post about this very matter. The headlines is Devin Archer said the opposite of what Republicans claimed. And he addresses this issue. Let me find it here. I can do a Control F. So I'll read. It's a little bit long. In fact, as Republican Dan Goldman, Democrat of New York, pointed out in questioning Archer, Shokin had himself helped relieve some of that pressure on Burisma. Those assets in London, they were unfrozen in part because Shokin refused to assist a British investigation into Zlochevsky, Goldman noted. Quote, this goes to the idea that Shokin, who was prosecutor general in 2015, was good for Burisma, Goldman said. Archer replied. So this leaves the impression that Archer was assenting to the idea that Shokin was good for Burisma. So I went back to the original transcript, and I'll pick it up from that same point. Question. And so this goes to the idea that Shokin, who was prosecutor general in 2015, was good for Burisma. Answer. Question. Is that fair? Now Vice President Biden was vocal about his concerns about corruption in the prosecutor general's office in Ukraine during this time period. Answer. Correct. Question. And called for the removal of Shokin from office. Is that correct? Answer. Yes, that was very well publicized. Question. Okay. And the Senate Minority Report, which I referenced earlier, described how Vice President's public calls for the Ukrainian government to remove Shokin as prosecutor general was part of an anti-corruption policy of the U.S. government with broad bipartisan support, as well as support from allies and international institutions like the EU and the International Monetary Fund. Do you agree with that conclusion? Answer. Sorry, can you repeat that? Question. Yeah. The vice president's public calls for the removal of Shokin was part of this broad bipartisan international anti-corruption effort in Ukraine. Answer. Yes, I believe that was part of the conversation. Question. And here's the key part. Question. But it was bad for Burisma. That was the perception at Burisma because they had Shokin under their control. Answer. This is the part that he left out. Answer. No. Burisma never informed me of that. That's what I was told, that it was bad for Burisma. But I don't know. I don't know if it was good or bad. Mr. Schwartz, told by the DC team. Mr. Archer, yeah, by the DC team. So I can't really explain what Bump is claiming there. It seems to me very clear that every time the issue came up, Archer backed off in his under oath testimony and said he didn't know, he never heard it from Burisma, and the narrative that he did hear always came from the DC team. So I'll leave it to Mr. Bump to respond to that if he gets wind of this. I know the plain meaning of the word spun and fed.
That's fine.
And I know the
and
plain
he's
and I know the
talking to
plain
Tucker
meaning
Carlson, and he's enjoying and smiling and saying what Tucker Carlson
and
wants
I know
to
the
hear.
plain
Of course,
meaning
that's
of
fine.
the
That's
word.
why I laugh.
I know the plain meaning of the analogy, saying this is checkers, not.
This is so silly. So then find me evidence that Joe Biden acted on behalf of Burisma when he called for the firing of Shokin. Find me evidence of that. And there is none.
I'm getting.
I just
to
don't
that.
yes, okay. If you want to nitpick and pick out specific isolated snippets of conversation between Devin Archer and Tucker Carlson, who's the least good faith actor in the history of human journalism, fine, great. We can have this conversation, but it's not getting to the point. And the point, I thought, was to evaluate this charge that Joe Biden had acted corruptly in regard to Shokin and Burisma. And there's no evidence of that. And Devin Archer's own sworn testimony undercuts your argument, regardless of his using the word spun or fed.
Okay, but just for my own edification,
Jesus Christ,
do accept that when he's saying that, he's trying to indicate that wasn't the truth. It was
the way I view that is that he understands he's on Tucker Carlson's show. He understands that
But he
he's
said the
become
same thing under
useful
oath.
and he is finding attention. Yes, I understand that. But but did you actually see? Is that this portion of his testimony when he's speaking to the Republican investigators, or is when he's speaking to Dan Goldman?
You do understand that.
Did you read the Dan Goldman part?
Yes, I read
in which
everything.
Dan Goldman actually evaluated it, and he didn't use weasel words like that, if I remember correctly.
But you do understand that his lawyer can't allow him to incriminate himself in any kind of conspiracy to undermine U.S. policy. So he has to be very, very careful what he says here if he was involved in trying to get Shokin fired. So, and you'll see here his lawyer comes in and stops him. But
He stopped him because he didn't want him conveying hearsay evidence.
It seems painfully obvious to me that when somebody speaks that way, just finish the rest of the video, Nicole, so here I ends up.
This is great.
No, I think in this particular case, it's pretty high stakes and pretty sophisticated. So the narrative that I was told was that. That's just, I've said it under oath and I'll say it again.
I mean, it's obvious to any reasonable person that he may be lying, but it's obviously he's communicating that the narrative is more than meets the eye.
Okay, so
when you say chestnut checkers, this is more
sophisticated. Let's just
do you agree with me?
Let's just do this. I don't agree with you.
You think that's a straightforward answer?
No, I think he is intentionally being weaselly because he understands what Tucker Carlson wants to say.
But he said the same thing to the committee.
And we just went over that, and it depends on who is asking the question.
But he said the same thing to the committee.
I understand that, but here's what I'm saying. I am willing to say to you, I don't agree with you, and I think it's very straightforward, and that he is actually saying that Burisma executives viewed Shokin as an ally. I think that it's pretty clear, and he said that under oath. But let's just say, let's cede your point.
Yeah.
You're right. He was weaseling it. That's the contrary. That's the opposite of what he's trying to say, and he's winking the whole time he's saying it. Now what do you do with it? Now where's your evidence? Now what else do you have? And the answer is nothing.
Hold on. Play the one that says Victor. Play the one that says Shokin was a threat.
This is great.
I'm literally ceding this point, even though I disagree. And you're wrong.
I want the listeners to hear.
So, Shokin was and I'm gonna get the dates wrong, but Shokin was he was the prosecutor, the head prosecutor in Ukraine, and he was taking a close look at Burisma.
But within Burisma,
right,
this Shokin was considered a threat to your business.
Shokin was considered a threat to the business. I think anyone in, again, you got to get the signals to the government. I think anyone in government was always a threat, and always trying to shake down these businesses that were highly successful and enriching the owners and the staff and the board and whatever. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, Shokin was taking a look, and again, if I wasn't involved in Shokin or any of this, but he was a threat. He ended up
makes clear. I'm not part of that. Go ahead.
Seizing assets.
No, makes clear he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Nikolai, a house, some cars, a couple properties, and Nikolai actually
you hear
never
what he's
went
saying,
back
right?
to Ukraine after
What,
Shokin.
you hear what he's saying? What's he saying right there? Tell me what he's saying.
He's saying that Shokin was considered a threat. He seized a lot.
Why was Shokin considered a threat?
Because he seized all that property.
Yes, not because he's investigating them, because he's corrupt, because he's stealing from them. That's what he's telling you.
For whatever reason, that's fine.
But there's no investigation. This is the whole point.
I don't know.
You think they're trying to get rid of? You think they wanted to get rid of Shokin? See, what you're doing is you're flipping the entire narrative. You think they're trying to get rid of Shokin because they were sick of Shokin breathing down their neck and dipping in their pockets?
I don't know why they're trying to get rid of Shokin. The only question is, were they trying to get rid of Shokin?
The idea of signals and influence, the prize is enough in speaking or hearing or knowing that you have that proximity to power. No one is so unsophisticated that's been in politics for 50 years that Hunter is going to talk
Okay, you can
about.
stop there. No one is so unsophisticated who's been in politics for 50 years. What is he saying there?
Did you read the transcript of Devin Archer's testimony?
I read every word of it.
Did you see when he was questioned about the email he'd received from Hunter Biden, in which Hunter Biden said in the email, look, I know we can't actually influence my father on this, but we need to give the perception that we can influence my father on this.
Okay.
Did you see that email?
Is your point to me that I'm reading Archer right, but I just shouldn't trust what he's trying to communicate here? He's doing it.
No, he's saying exactly that. He's saying that, yes, people used us because they thought we were a conduit to Joe Biden. Yes, and he said no one is so unsophisticated that's been in politics for 50 years. He's saying that Biden. Well, we didn't see what the predicate for what that no one's sophisticated. What he just said in that clip you just played was he said that yes, they saw us as being a conduit.
No, the predicate was they didn't talk about anything specific.
Well,
no
you
one
show the predicate for that actual comment.
Play the beginning again.
Oh, jeez.
Well,
I mean, you didn't, but.
Play just very beginning.
Do you know that Hunter spoke to his dad about Burisma? Did you ever see them talk about it? Hear them talk about it? Joe Biden?
No, I don't have.
That's the
knowledge of
predicate.
that,
And
but
no
I
one is.
assume-
He says no one is in politics at 50 or be so unsophisticated. Okay, to do that.
Okay, but time out. What did he just say there? What did he just say about Biden
tell
and
me.
Burisma? He said he never saw Joe Biden have any conversation about Burisma in his testimony.
Right, I'm talking
sworn,
about circumstantial evidence.
sworn testimony.
Okay,
but your
but-
circumstantial evidence is contrived.
Colin,
He's
but-
saying there was no involvement, but you're saying, but circumstantial evidence. He says under oath there's no involvement. He's asked directly, was Joe Biden at all involved in the business? He says no.
Okay, hopefully this is the last cut in of a transcript. This refers to the under oath testimony of where Archer is asked about Biden's conversations and involvement in the business. I'm picking up in the middle. No business deal specifics discussed ever at any of these things, but it was a nice, conversation. Question. And is that also the case at the first Cafe Milano dinner, that the conversation was not about Hunter Biden's businesses with his various business associates? Right. It was dinner conversation. Mr. Goldman interjects. And just to be clear, Joe Biden had nothing to do with any of your business ventures with Hunter Biden, right? He was, Mr. Archer, as far as ownership, Mr. Goldman, yeah. Or Mr. Archer, no. Mr. Goldman, investing or anything to your knowledge? Mr. Archer, not to my knowledge. Mr. Goldman, and in all this exhibit, 1,260 pages, you didn't see a single wire transfer to Joe Biden, did you? Mr. Archer, no. I have not seen a wire transfer to Joe Biden.
Like, that's direct evidence.
He was not involved in the business. I'm not saying he was involved in the business.
Well, then what are you saying? Well, then what's your question about Joe Biden? I thought you were arguing that Joe Biden was trying to get rid of Shokin for Burisma,
That's
on
not
Burisma's
involved
behalf.
in the business. That's to help hook up his son. Play call-ins were impactful stuff. He's not involved in the business. Not working for Burisma.
It's been reported, and you have said that there
doesn't
were
make any sense.
occasions when Joe Biden would call in with clients present on a speakerphone.
Right.
I can't
How-
believe we're
how many
sitting
times
here
have you
like
done that?
This is for
adjudicating.
people
what Tucker
need to
Carlson
listen to it at home. They don't know this
10-year
like we do.
partnership.
But
I
this is
would-
all setups by Tucker Carlson to which he's responding. Of course, he's doing the same thing you're doing,
That's
which is
called an
leading
interview.
questions.
That's called an interview.
Oh, it's not Tucker Carlson. You got to be.
Oh, let's hear it. Let's hear it anyway.
Oh, okay.
the number I'm going with is 20. That's probably the amount that I
So a lot.
kind of recall. Yeah, a lot. You could say.
So Joe Biden, who's very much a product of Washington, of course must have known that he was calling in to effectively a business meeting that his son was having. I mean, he must have understood that was kind of what his son was selling.
Well, that's hard for me to speculate.
Hold on. Stop, Nicole. Now, you see, he laughs when he says, he's obviously communicating with his face. It's hard for me to speculate, but he's joking.
Right. Did you also see him look up when Tucker first said, and he's like thinking about is that a fair thing to say? I mean, look,
Okay.
yes, we can sit here and
continue the
this.
clip. Continue the clip. Almost finished.
But
I'll read you.
I guess my question, just to keep it to the facts, Joe Biden, then the sitting vice president, knew that there were Hunter's business associates in the room.
Yeah, I think I can definitively say at particular dinners or meetings, he knew there were business associates, and or if I was there, I was a business associate too. So I think, or if any of the other colleagues from the DC office or the New York office were there. So yeah, at times there were. From the to be completely clear on the calls, I don't know if it was an orchestrated call-in or not. It certainly was powerful though, because if you're sitting with a foreign business person and you hear the vice president's voice, that's prize enough. I mean, that's pretty impactful stuff, right?
All right, so this was important stuff. Archie says, yeah, it was a high-pressure environment, and there were constant requests for help. What did Hunter do after he was given that request? Listen, I did not hear his phone call, but he called his dad. How do you know that? Because I think Vadim told me, but again, it's unclear. I just know that there was a call that happened there, and I was not privy to it. What did Vadim tell you the call was about? Just that we called DC, but he didn't know again. It's not like there was not a, we've all got our problems solved kind of, revelation. I was not on that side of the equation. Question, was it during the drive back that Vadim told you that Hunter Biden had called Vice President Biden at that time? And then Archer answers, it would have been some point after there or after, maybe the next day. So the exact time I can't say. We spent 3 days together, but that was and then his lawyer interjects. He told you expressly that he called his father or he called DC. And Archer says DC.
That's right. And then he said that later under different
Right.
testimony.
Now,
and
when
then
you-
it's
right when
there
your
are other
lawyer
parts of the
when your
testimony
lawyer
in which they make
interjects
clear
when your lawyer interjects to correct that.
just because they don't want you to lie under oath. Yes, go ahead.
No, he said his father. Listen, it's because
later in the testimony, which I gather you didn't actually read.
I read it all.
Later
Don't
in
be
the
snide.
testimony,
I read it all.
I'm going to be, because you're presenting facts that are later disproven. Later, he is questioned on that exact same thing and clarifies, I can only attest to it being D.C. In D.C., they had a group of people who had been arranged in part by Devin Archer and Hunter Biden who were working on behalf of Burisma.
Okay, fair enough. So this is what I think.
You can't just say fair enough.
I'm going to respond to you. I understand your point. It's a fair point in a laboratory environment, but in the real world, when in the same paragraph he says he called his dad. Now he's remembering a call to the guy's dad, and he keeps repeating that, dad, the vice president, and his lawyer keeps correcting him. You mean D.C., which to me is his lawyer's trying to keep him out of trouble. But obviously, he's had 2 years to prepare. This has been in the news for 2 years already. When he says he called his dad, if one of the Trump kids make that same slip, we would all assume he had meant to say he called his dad. We would understand that the blurting out repeatedly of something, of a detail so volatile as he called his dad, he called the vice president, this is likely the truth. And repeating what his lawyer tells him to say is most likely the legally careful thing to say.
Okay, so let's pause, because I thought we had just agreed prior to this conversation, this aspect of the conversation, that he later did actually clarify that he only could attest to having there been a call to DC. The lawyer's job is to make sure he's not lying under oath. He's under penalty of perjury when he's making.
So why do you think he said
Let me finish
his dad?
Let me finish this. I don't know why he said he
Well,
called his dad. I don't know.
You're a grown
you
man
can't-
who says something like that.
But you can't do this. You can't say he said he's calling his dad, therefore he called his dad. You can't do that and at the same time ignore the fact that he later said, well, actually, I only know he called D.C. And you can't do that and ignore the fact that he also later said Joe Biden was at no point involved in the business.
Well,
you
listen,
tried to split a
I
hair
totally
earlier about the
disagree
firing
with
of Shokin. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
You earlier tried to split a hair about, the firing of Shokin, that wasn't involved in the business. If Hunter Biden were calling Joe Biden with Burisma next to him to effect change on behalf of Burisma, that's unquestionably about affecting the business if that had occurred. Devin Archer says he knows no instance in which that occurred.
Okay.
Ergo, there's no reason to assume that he is actually trying to say he called his dad and then his lawyer's like calling him off of it for some reason. And even so, none of that deals with the broader evidence, which
in a
you
normal finding of
refuse to
fact,
engage with.
It's perfectly normal for the opposing counsel to come up and try to rehabilitate or try to think. Obviously,
This is silly. This conversation's silly. I don't understand why we're having this conversation. You refuse to actually engage in this in good faith. You really do.
No.
You're very set. Look, you have me on here because I am the putative, according to this expert, guy who knows this stuff, but then you refuse to acknowledge what I'm saying.
I'm not refusing.
It's really
I'm
unfair.
disagreeing with what you're saying because as a human, all these kind of things.
But you refuse to engage with the evidence I present. There's no evidence.
If I
for
was
it,
a
and you
juror,
refuse to acknowledge
if I was a juror, and I heard him say twice he called his dad, and I heard him say spun and fed, and this is chess, not checkers. The totality of all that, I would say that was a pretty powerful picture of a man who was.
this is my point. Because you refuse to acknowledge any of the other evidence that runs contrary to that,
What's
which is
the other
the job of
evidence?
the fact
when
that
Goldman
he
told
later walked that back. The fact that he said Joe Biden was not involved in in any conversation in the business with Devin Archer and Hunter Biden. The fact that Hunter Biden said we need to make it look like
being
my
involved
father's
in the business is a different matter.
Of course it is. Of course it changes. Of course you change your verbiage
We're
in
not
order to
talking
suit
about-
your argument. Look, this is silly. This is silly. There's no point in this conversation.
Define being involved in business, and I can tell you if that's what we're talking. What do you mean by define?
How would it not be the case that if Devin Archer actually thought that Hunter Biden had stood with a Burisma executive and called Joe Biden, that wouldn't count as him getting Joe Biden involved in the business? How would that not meet any standard, any reasonable standard?
Because,
It would.
because
Of course you have it because. Look,
You asked
I
me,
think
I'm
I'm
gonna
about
answer
done.
it.
I think I'm about done. This is silly. It's a silly conversation because you refuse to acknowledge any of the contrary evidence. You had me here to present to you the opposing argument, and I'm happy to do that, but you refuse to acknowledge it. All you want to do is berate me and show me Tucker
what can I
Carlson
search
clips.
for here to find the Goldman testimony? So the answer.
It's at the end of Devin Archer.
What word should I search for?
I don't know. I don't.
Involved in business?
I mean, I'm not going to sit here all night while you search stuff on your computer. This is silly.
Okay,
Look,
well,
I don't mean to be disrespectful.
I
but-
was trying to do it to give the best airing of the point you're trying to make.
Well,
That's
don't you trust that I'm presenting that accurately?
I do trust that you're presenting it accurately, but I would like to get the exact quote. So we can parse it.
Okay, but we don't. But this is my point. We don't need to, because you had a circumstantial piece of evidence. I rebutted that and actually presented an additional reason the circumstantial evidence isn't valid. You, meanwhile, have not dealt with any of the direct evidence because you refused to do so.
Okay, you know what? I'm just saying that I think when somebody 2 times says, "Yeah, Vadim told me,"
I know what you're saying. I get it.
Vadim told me he called his dad.
I get it.
Smart, sophisticated people are not capable of.
Well, I'm dim-witted, and so I assume that the other things that he said are valid.
Especially someone who's about to go to jail, this issue is at the front of his mind for a long time, is not capable of misspeaking twice. I didn't mean he called his dad. I didn't mean he called the vice president. I meant he called some bureaucrat. It's a tremendous mistake to make. Would you agree? It's a tremendous. It's akin to the guy accused of murder saying, "Yeah, and then I stabbed her." And they're like, "You didn't mean you stabbed?" "No, I didn't mean I stabbed her." But how did he say? No, didn't you hear the evidence? He said he didn't stab her. Yeah, but I also heard him say he did stab her. You should not have. That means nothing. How could you even think the fact that he would slip and say something like he stabbed her is something you should take seriously? Didn't I prove to you when the other lawyer said, and he said I didn't stab her? He said he called his dad. He said it twice. I'm of the mind to say that's much more likely to be the true story than the one his lawyer egged him to say.
Fine.
That's, and I would say that objectively in any criminal. Okay.
Got it.
All right. So
Great.
Now there's other stuff that came out in my research here. So first of all, Matt Taibbi. So
okay, I'm not gonna. I appreciate this. This has been very entertaining.
all right, you know what? Let's
conclude.
let's get
because we're not getting anywhere. Because you refuse to move from.
Okay.
Let's
go over the laptop.
Engaged.
Let's go.
I'm not gonna do this. I'm just not going to. There's no point. I appreciate your having me on. There's just no point because all you want to do is you want to have me here as the putative expert so that you can present me with things that have been debunked multiple times that I've written about.
What's been debunked?
These claims. I've written about this argument about his dad calling him. I've written about this. Did you read what I wrote?
It's not debunked. Neither of us were there.
Well, I debunked it in the standpoint that I've already addressed this and presented the counter arguments to it.
Okay. So this is what I feel about this. This is what I'm saying, the blood in the water. To me, all these words like spun, fed.
This is silly. Again, this is silly.
Okay.
Why are we going over this again?
Let's get off this then. And also, I don't know what your take is on this alias email, but that's nothing. When the laptop came out, they said it was not verified, and initially,
I'm going to lose my mind. Ask your question.
Is not something we can talk about?
No, of course we can talk about it.
Half the country believes this stuff.
I know, because half the country doesn't actually dig into the issues, and they instead
here's your
take
chance to disabuse people.
But okay, well then go
ahead. You don't read the Washington Post.
Go ahead.
I at first said, well, this is really fishy. This guy who doesn't remember, blah, blah, blah. But a week later, Fox News presented, and the New York Times then covered it, that the FBI had seized the laptop in 2019. There was an evidence number and all that stuff, right? That was before the first debate. And the laptop, we knew then, had been dropped off before Biden had even declared his candidacy. So at that point, I thought to myself, well, obviously this laptop is real. And yet Biden got on TV and said this is a hoax. They asked him, are you saying, no, he said it's a plant. He said, and they asked him, are you saying this is a hoax? And he said, yeah, that's exactly what you remember that?
I don't remember exactly what he said, but yes, he was not embracing of the idea.
Yeah. So actually, it's really quick. Play the.
Where are you going with this? Like literally,
the first one, Nicole. Biden labels a hunter. Well, question is, do you think he was telling the truth then?
What difference? Literally, what difference does it make? He's running for president. What difference does it make beyond politically? Which, of course, I don't think he should lie. But beyond politically, what difference does it make?
I'll tell you why in a second. I have a good answer to that.
Oh, I look forward to hearing.
I want to talk about.
Then he's a corrupt politician.
All right.
So don't give me the stuff about how you're this innocent baby. Joe, they're calling you a corrupt politician.
Nobody. President Trump, I want to stay on the issue of race. We're talking about the issue.
Laptop from hell.
President Trump, we're talking about race right now, and I do want to stay on the issue of race. President Trump,
I have to respond to that.
Please.
Because look,
very quickly.
there are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
And that's exactly what.
Is this
okay? So he says it's a plant, and he basically says it was a hoax. He said that's exactly, and didn't get the last word out, but what other word could it be? If everything was forged, he had to know. So the question is, why did he lie?
Did you literally? And I'm trying very hard to be respectful. I really am. This is easily addressed if you'd read 2 articles that are not written by Matt Taibbi, Tucker Carlson, or the New York
I
Times.
read a lot more than Matt Taibbi.
It is,
and I don't read Tucker Carlson.
But I mean,
so why do you lie? Because he's running for president. You acknowledge that he lied there?
Did he know that the FBI had this in 2018?
Well,
Could he possibly have known that?
Yes, because Hunter would have known that.
How would Hunter know that? The laptop was not in Hunter's possession in 2018. He got it from the store.
All right, it's
So he has this. No.
You're right about that.
Excuse me. He has this letter, which was signed by 50 people. He misrepresented it first, saying that they said it was Russian. They didn't. They said they had the hallmark of being a Russian disinformation idea. Did you know that there was a report from Time Magazine that said a lot of this material from Hunter Biden that ended up on laptop was actually floating around Ukraine in early 2020? That there was actually available. People were trying to sell it to folks. Did you know that?
A report now
From Time Magazine, yeah. The Time Magazine reporter who's
verified.
Ukraine.
Is the report verified?
Well, I mean, it's a report. Yeah.
Well, there's reports. There's reports of everything.
Okay,
I didn't know that.
Fine. Okay, fine.
I mean,
I'm not saying it's valid. I'm not saying it's necessarily valid. I'm just
you
saying
think it's
that
valid?
I think that it certainly seems credible. Yeah, absolutely. There are indications that Hunter Biden's iCloud account had been hacked. There's strong.
I'm going to concede to you that it's
fine.
It's possible.
So why does he say this? In part, probably because he doesn't know the laptop was taken by the FBI, and he says it in part because he's seen this letter.
But he had to know the emails were legit.
How could he have known that? He didn't know what the emails were. Do you think
they were in the Post?
There was one thing in the New York Post that was addressed to Hunter Biden.
Right.
So maybe he asked Hunter Biden and said, "Go back through your emails and see."
No,
if you
the
have
thing in
this
the New York
email."
Post regarded his meeting with Vadim.
Right, but that's not what we're talking about.
And he knew he met with Vadim, so he knew this was true.
Well, he doesn't necessarily know that this email was accurate. Well,
he could ask. He could ask
Are we
Hunter.
talking about the laptop? Or are we talking about this meeting?
If my wife, how would it be? If I find,
I just don't understand. What are we talking about? Are we talking about the laptop or the meeting?
If somebody sends my wife an email, she somehow comes across an email that says I'm fucking her sister, and she says to me, "Is this true?" I'm saying, "Well, it's not verified."
What happened in 2016?
So
what happened in 2016?
He asked
in October 2016. What happened?
What I'm saying,
what happened in October 2016? WikiLeaks starts producing all this material that had been stolen by the Russian government from Hillary Clinton's campaign and from the DNC. Right. That was material that was a Russian disinformation campaign to extent, but also a Russian interference effort.
This
Here's
debate
my
is
point.
after we knew the FBI took it from the guy in 2019, before he was running for president. We already knew.
No, we didn't know that the FBI had that point. That
yes,
during this debate,
the Fox News story that showed the FBI evidence number. You don't know this came out before the debate.
Okay, fine. It doesn't. I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter.
Oh, it matters hugely because the entire basis of that letter of 51, the entire basis of that letter of the 51 intelligence officers was gutted. Okay, here's the last one. So my point was that once we found out that the FBI had taken possession of the laptop in December of 2019, the rationale of the letter from the 51 intelligence officers was gutted. And this was known and should have been realized before that debate where Biden called it disinformation. Sorry, I'm getting a little tired. So here is from the letter. This was the stated rationale. For the Russians at this point, with Trump down in the polls, there is incentive for Moscow to pull out the stops to do anything possible to help Trump win and or to weaken Biden should he win. A laptop op fits the bill as the publication of the emails are clearly designed to discredit Biden. But again, the laptop was with the guy in April of 2019 before Biden had declared for the presidency. So it couldn't be because Trump was down in the polls. It couldn't be something to be done because Trump's loss seemed imminent. The rest of the letter also focuses on Giuliani, for instance. Our view that the Russians are involved in the Hunter Biden email issue is consistent with 2 other significant data points as well. According to the Washington Post, citing 4 sources, quote, U.S. intelligence agencies warned the White House last year that Giuliani was the target of an influence operation by Russian intelligence. Yes, but again, since the laptop was dropped off in April of 2019, it wouldn't have been the issue with Giuliani. And one has to imagine that if the intelligence officials had known that the FBI had the laptop, maybe they would have never written that letter.
But this is my point.
I'll
My
read you from the
point
letter.
is that the Russian disinformation campaign / interference campaign in 2016 was predicated on the release of real information. And what that letter said is, this looks like the same thing. His response there is, this looks like the same thing based on this letter from these experts.
A hoax?
Does he then,
A hoax doesn't sound like
okay,
real
first of all, you
information.
just admitted he didn't say it was a hoax, but yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Well, you just said
they
he
said,
didn't say
you
it.
mean it's a hoax?
Right,
He said, yeah,
right,
that's exactly
right,
what.
Right. No, he said, is it like the Russia hoax? And he says, yes. So what does
Yes,
Trump say is the Russia hoax? He says anything related to Russian interference is part of the Russia hoax.
Right.
So we don't know that Joe Biden's. I mean, look, yes, we can sit here and parse this, but none of this gets to the point, which is you have no evidence that Joe Biden acted on Hunter Biden's behalf or that Joe Biden took money. And now let's go back. Let's go back.
Never
We're wrapping up.
There's
Let's
never
go
going
back.
to be evidence.
Of course there's not, because if there were, then you'd actually have your point proven. There's no evidence that your point is accurate. Let's go back to your point about family and how family works together and so on and so forth.
Okay.
That's all very well and good, right? That's all very well and good that you and your dad made money, he gave money to your mother. That's fine. That's great.
But
I'm
there
glad to
is
hear it.
evidence.
This is the question is, did Joe Biden have Hunter Biden act on his behalf in order to enrich himself and to look the other way on behalf of that? That's the fundamental question.
Not to me. I didn't make that. I'm not trying. I can't prove that.
Okay, then what's your question?
Then
what's your question about Joe Biden's behavior?
I have two issues here. One is Joe Biden's behavior, and one is the issue of the press. The press actually bothers me more than Joe Biden.
Because you don't listen to the press. I'm sitting here and I'm telling you, you're wrong about these things, and you don't listen, and you continue to insist upon things that are, parsing of language. And it's just, this is why I keep saying it's silly.
So on the issue of Biden, I think that it's obvious that he was aware that he was being helpful to his son in his son's relationship with these criminals. And that is a scandal because he was working against American policy. It doesn't have to be criminal. Very few serious scandals are criminal. Trump was famously impeached, not for doing anything criminal. As a matter of fact, Dershowitz was mocked because Dershowitz's argument was, unless it's criminal, you can't impeach him. Remember that?
Actually, Dershowitz was mocked because his argument was because the president did it and he was doing it in service of his campaign, that is a political act and therefore he can't be impeached for it. And that's what got him mocked.
No, that's not correct. He was mocked for saying that things had to be, you can check it out, it had to be criminal to be impeachable. And it doesn't have to be criminal. What Trump was impeached for was putting his personal issues in front of American policy. If Biden helped his son by obstructing American policy in some way, even if it's minorly in terms of everybody thinking his hands off Burisma, or more seriously in terms of pulling the trigger on Shokin,
it's just,
then that's very, very serious. It doesn't need to be criminal.
But again,
can I read from the?
No, you can't, because here's the thing: you just suggested that if it was him trying to pull the trigger on Shokin, but again, you've offered no evidence beyond your parsing of what Devin Archer said under oath, and you're insisting that because of how he said it, he meant the opposite under oath. That therefore Shokin was actually.
You want
something
evidence?
of.
I mean,
I don't. I got to go. Like,
evidence,
this has been great. This
evidence.
Is, what literally I was told this is going to be 45 minutes, and we've been going. For, well over.
It's a shame because this is a good conversation.
It's not a good conversation because you refuse to listen to what I'm saying to you. You asked me on to present evidence. I keep telling you.
I think you think I have to agree with you to be listening. I'm listening very carefully. To
what I think is,
as a matter of fact, I even conceded some points that you made.
Well, that's because
I was listening.
Made valid points. Look, I'm not saying that. I do think this was a bit of a setup.
Is
Taibbi
Taibbi unreliable?
I do think this was a setup.
Okay.
Taibbi absolutely has an agenda. Of course he has. There's no question.
You have no agenda?
I do have an agenda.
Okay.
My agenda is
to
do my best to try and present accurate information to the public. Right. And I have an institution behind me that holds me to account when I don't do that, right. Which I think is an important consideration. But look, here's the thing. You came into this with a preset understanding and expectation.
You spent so much time not letting me think. We could have covered a lot more ground. I just want to say, I'll say before we go that what astounded me about the press. If you answer two questions, it'd be nice.
But I mean, again, you're attacking the press because you refuse to listen to what we're saying.
Okay. Is there something in particular you want to say that I haven't listened to, and then you let me ask my question?
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we had to go over these things over and over and over again is evidence that you're not actually listening to what I'm saying, or you're not exceeding the point that obviously, if someone is saying under oath X, you can't then just say, well, I assume he means not X, despite all the external evidence, which you have refused consistently to address. The fact that there's no evidence for, and in fact, evidence to the contrary of your central point about Shokin and Burisma. You haven't addressed that at all.
Well,
but yeah, I
I've
would
been trying
expect.
to. Every time I try to get it out, you
That's
stop
not
me.
true. That's not true.
Every time.
That's not true.
There's evidence. Both Shokin said there's a leaked phone call, and there was evidence yesterday in the papers yesterday that the State Department said
Do you
that
think
Shokin,
Shokin's a reliable interlocutor?
it's evidence.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, he's just like the entire point was that he was a corrupt government official who got
I have. Well, what's interesting, I never got to get it out, but what is interesting is that Shokin made something in an interview two years ago, and then Taibbi had some released transcript of a call between Biden and Poroshenko. And it's interesting how they line up. I was surprised by that. And then yesterday, something came out in the papers that said that the State Department had said that Shokin was doing a good job. So this is all.
Yeah, so I saw that in the New York Post, right? That there was this one memo that came out in
that's
2015 after there had already been this pressure on Shokin. So one memo, but that's called cherry picking. Which is all this
but I would say
conversation.
the weakest thing you've said to me is to just dismiss the obvious telegraphing of what Devin Archer is saying in terms of Fed and spun and chess, not checkers. I mean, checkers, not chess, whatever he said. To say, well, he's trying to please Tucker Carlson. I mean, that's a leap of faith. Maybe you're right.
So let's say this. I agree.
Devin
with
Archer
you
is not.
I agree with you that Hunter Biden's activity when Joe Biden was both serving as vice president and afterward, I agree that it was sketchy. I agree that it was a bad look. I agree that particularly while he was serving as president, he ought not to have been doing that. If it emerges in the future, which it may, I absolutely concede the point that there may be direct evidence that Joe Biden took bribe money. That may come up.
What do you take from the text message to his adult daughter? Hunter's text message. I have to give 50% of my income to Pop.
I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means.
Well, it's
I know it's circumstantial evidence, and you prefer that.
No,
to
what
direct evidence.
could it mean?
I have no idea.
But doesn't it?
I don't know.
Well,
I appreciate your.
Has anybody asked her?
I don't know. I don't know.
Don't you think somebody should ask her?
Okay. Like I'm not. I just said I don't know, and I don't know what to make of it, so I have nothing else to say about it.
Yeah,
what
but
do you want me to say?
Yeah, but you say there's no evidence, but then there's a text message where he says, "I give Pop 50% of my money." That's evidence.
Okay. Well, okay, fine.
So
it's evidence. I appreciate you having me on.
It doesn't. That something like that. Who do you think is being more? I listen to that and I'm saying,
Am I?
You can free to go.
I feel you want me to leave, like just walk out in the middle of this because that way you can
you can go.
Right.
Is this a standard? Really, this is the way the Washington Post handles people who disagree with them.
When I agree to be on for 45 minutes,
go,
and then
go.
I get on for an hour and 15. Yeah, that after a while I go.
Go.
Thanks for having me.